Ozark. This is definitely a show that I'm going to be sad to see go. It's currently in its final season, and the final season is split into 2 parts. Part 1 is out now, as well as the 3 previous seasons, all available for you to watch on Netflix. Part 2 of season 4, which will wrap up this series finale, is set to air and be available on April 29th, this spring, 2022. I'm not the biggest fan of when shows decide to split the final season, because it feels like you're getting less bang for your buck and getting like less episodes and then having to wait usually just as long as it would take between normal seasons. And then they tend to wrap up with a quantity of shows that leaves you wanting. But in this case, for Ozark at least, we got 7 full episodes for part 1, and we're getting 7 full episodes for part 2. So technically as a season, we're getting more episodes than a normal season. That and the fact that we don't have to wait like a year for the second half. It's just a couple months since part 1 started airing in January and part 2 is going to air in April. So those 2 things make me not mad at it. And for me now, I'm even happier that I had to wait and didn't get around to watching the series when it dropped in January. And I literally just wrapped it up like last week. So it's only about a month wait for me. Anyways, dope show that I highly recommend. Let me jump into some takeaways and dope moments from this past season. But first, as always, let me start with the official synopsis for the season. Freedom from the cartel is seemingly within reach, but fraying familial bonds may prove to be the bird's ultimate undoing. Netflix always has like the shortest synopses ever. Synopses or synopsises? Anyway, moving on, let's give a shout out to the writers of the series. Starting with Whit Anderson, Michael M. Chang, Laura Dealey, Bill Dubuque, Ryan Farley, Allison Feltz, Jed Rapp Goldstein, Mickey Johnson, Paul Colesby, David Manson, Chris Mundy, John Shiban, Mark Williams, Ning Zhu, and Martin Zimmerman. Shout out to all the writers of this amazing season and this amazing series. And now without further ado, let's jump into a few scenes and takeaways from this season that resonated with me. This is not meant to be a comprehensive recap and review of the season, just some anecdotes sprinkled throughout the series in no particular order that resonated with me and I wanted to share with you. There's this character in the series named Sam Dermody, played by Kevin L. Johnson. And he plays like a pushover character that's very naive. And it seems like every other character in the series just uses him to like take advantage of him and use him in some way. And in that capacity, when Ruth Langmore's character, played by Julia Garner, needs someone to quote unquote manage a hole in the wall motel that she purchased to be able to launder money through, she sought him out to be that manager because she needed someone dumb who wasn't going to ask questions or catch on to anything that was going on. But he has this dope scene with the character Kerry Stone, played by Eric Layden, who plays this celebrity chef character in the show that is a high roller, gambles a lot, and Ruth met him when she used to work at Marty Bird's casino. Marty Bird, played by the incredible Jason Bateman, who has also directed, I think, like upwards of a dozen episodes throughout the series. But she met this celebrity chef character while she was working there, and she had an idea to use him and his connects to sell heroin to, because Ruth has since gone off on her own and partnered up with Darlene Snell, played by Lisa Emery. Anyway, long story short, Kerry Stone is in town to test the product, and he stays at this hole-in-the-wall motel after an almost near-death overdose experience the night before. When he's leaving, the naive pushover character Sam, he's behind the counter, Kerry's checking out, and he asks if he can ask him a question. And he asks him if he knows how to make paella. And the celebrity chef guy is kind of like thrown off a little bit, he just almost died the night before. This guy is very awkwardly, weirdly asking him about paella, but he humors him. And Sam gives him this story. He's like, my ex-girlfriend, I made her paella and I went all out and I got, fresh, great ingredients. And her response to me was that it didn't taste like authentic paella that she has had before. And this celebrity chef is just sitting there kind of dumbfounded listening to him. But again, humors him. And he's like, all right, tell me about the ingredients you used. Did you get fresh peppers from the market? And Sam responds, yeah, I did. And onions and herbs and spices. Yeah, it's all of that. And did you put chicken in it and sausage in it and beef in it? Yeah, I did. Yeah. And he lists out like a bunch of ingredients and Sam is like responding affirmatively. And he's like, in his head, Sam said, he's like, yeah, I did all that. I did all that right? Then the chef takes a pause and he says, you're fucking smothering it. And he walks away. And I just thought that was a dope scene. And I'm not positive if he said you're smothering it, as in he's smothering the paella. He's like ODing with everything instead of keeping it simple. Or if he said that he's smothering her, as in, going too above and beyond for his ex. Or if it's just like a double meaning thing. But I thought it was a dope scene. Moving on to Jonah Bird, played by Skylar Gardner. He's about 15 years old in this season. And definitely in a rebellious teen stage, more so than a normal teen would be, I would say, because he's also kind of like the moral compass of the show in an odd way, because everybody in the show is doing some illegal shit. And that goes to the drug dealers, the drug cartels, the law enforcement that are on the take, politicians that are also on the take, money launderers, fake shell companies, etc. The list goes on. But he kind of like intertwined in his teenage rebellious phase that one goes through around this age. He's a constant reminder to his sister and his parents that, what they're doing is wrong and that they're drug dealers, that the mother had her own brother killed because he was essentially becoming an inconvenience to their business as usual. The mother, Wendy Bird, played by Laura Linney. And being the youngest one, they kind of like try not to tell him most things, but he finds them out anyway and seems to be like less blinded by what his parents do than the older sister, Charlotte Bird, played by Sophia Hublitz. And their roles kind of flipped in that way, because at first the older sister was like, what the fuck, what are you guys doing? And Jonah kind of found it cool. And now those roles are a bit more reversed. Charlotte seems to like desperately want the approval of her mother, kind of, being like team player to get the family through this quote unquote phase that they're going through of money laundering for the cartel so they can get out of that life. Even though season after season, we see that they're getting pulled in deeper and deeper into that life. And Jonah, who's always idolized his father, as young boys do, seems to have felt neglected by his dad and sought the approval of other people, other, male figures in his life, like his uncle Ben, which was the brother of Wendy Bird. And Ben Davis was played by Tom Pelphrey, who played an amazing role in the previous season. But prior to Ben coming on the show, Jonah gravitated towards Buddy Diker, played by Harris Yulin. And he kind of showed like this pattern, right? But anyway, long story short there, as kind of a fuck you to his parents, especially to his mom, he decided to start laundering himself, which also plays into him like idolizing his father, and did so for Ruth and Darlene, which put him that much more at odds with his parents and his family, because they are technically competing drug dealers to the cartel that Marty and Wendy launder for and work for. But definitely an important takeaway for me was that Marty's character, which by the way is one of the dopest characters I've seen in anything, although he's probably technically a sociopath, I love how calculating and on top of shit he is, and how organized he is with things. But his innate calm in any situation definitely has psychopath vibes. But anyway, Marty's character can't help it but kind of be proud of his son, following in his footsteps in a way, even though he knows it's wrong and he shouldn't be doing that, but he he's kind of proud that he's able to do what he's able to do at 14 years old. And even in the scene with Wendy, he's like, if he's doing this at 14, can you imagine? And she like cuts him off and she's like, do not be fucking proud of him right now. Moving on to another scene with Ruth, which grew on me like crazy, by the way. Like, I think from a casting perspective, her and her cousin Wyatt Langmore, played by Charlie Tahan, they're like being boom, exactly what you think of when you think of like white trash, just like looks wise. they're like perfectly casted, at least like visually. There's something about them that just screams trailer park. They're able to like pull that off. And I've seen Julia Garner in like other interviews and stuff like that, and she like looks like a completely different person. So I don't know exactly what it is, but they play those roles like so well. But initially I was kind of like turned off by her character. I don't know what it was. Like, she rubbed me the wrong way. Obnoxious, I guess, would be the best way to describe my, initial knee-jerk reaction to her. But she definitely grew on me and is a character that I root for. And she has this dope mini monologue. I think she's speaking with Jonah, and she says that God's a motherfucker. He built me smart enough to know how fucked up my life is, but not quite smart enough to get myself out of it. And that was definitely a dope line that sums up her character perfectly. Something else that I like about Ruth and her character is that she's loyal to a fault, if there is such a thing, especially to Marty. And she just seems to want to be loved and appreciated and held in high regard, like told that she's smart and capable. That seems to me, at least, to be her main desire. And just a couple more things for you guys here. Darlene is a wild girl. She is fucking ruthless. And I guess we knew that fucking season 1 or 2 when she killed her own husband at the end, because in her eyes, he was showing a little bit of weakness and wanting to get out of the drug game. And we saw it a bit in a previous season where Frank Cosgrove Jr.'s character, played by Joseph Sikora, which is the son of the head of the KC mob, Kansas City mob, Frank Cosgrove, played by John Bedford Lloyd, Jr. roughed up Ruth. In retaliation for that, Darlene shot him in the dick with a shotgun. But we see her like ruthlessness just this past season just elevate to new levels. For example, when the driver of that celebrity chef drove Ruth at the end of the night back to Darlene's, and he kind of tried to like strong arm and hint that, I won't tell the cops anything, but can you guys increase my pay a little bit for showing loyalty, blah blah blah. She like literally just pulled a shotgun and shot him right there, shot him dead right there. And Ruth and Wyatt had to go bury his body. And then similarly, Frank Cosgrove Sr. found out that she was dealing with her son directly, which she manipulated to kind of go against his dad's wishes in dealing her heroin and distributing it. And he went up to her ranch to tell her off, and she literally just shot him dead in her living room, the head of the KC Mafia, which by all intents and purposes would have been a fucking suicide request. She was just fucking wild. And Darlene and Wyatt, which is Ruth's younger cousin, is just like the weirdest, oddest couple I've ever seen in anything. But in a strange way, it actually worked. Go figure. Now, in terms of ruthless, we're introduced to a new character this season, which is Omar Navarro's nephew, Javi Elizondo. Omar Navarro is the head of the Navarro cartel, played by Felix Solis. He is who the main characters of this series are laundering money for. And his nephew, Javi Elizondo, played by Alfonso Herrera, is an overzealous, hot-headed, high-ranking cartel member that will succeed his uncle one day in taking over the entire operation. And if he had it his way, it would have been yesterday. So he's that kind of cat. But we see how ruthless he is early on. And we also know early on, it's revealed to us that he doesn't like Marty and Wendy, that when his uncle chose them over his previous attorney and like right hand in the States, which was Helen Pierce, his nephew actually wanted him to go the other way and kill Marty and Wendy and continue working with Helen Pierce. And he suspects, rightfully in some senses, Marty and Wendy double crossing them somehow, working against them. And we see just like how much he doesn't give a fuck when he just starts showing up at Marty's casino and Marty's house. And then he goes to stay at Helen's house. And he's like, well, you know, she's not going to be using it. And Javi wants Marty and Wendy to have Darlene killed. They're, again, competition in the drug game, at least locally. And Marty and Wendy try to downplay it and say, you know, she's not really competition. And also she has the local sheriff on the take. And if they get rid of her, then it'll turn the sheriff on to what they're doing. And it's not good business, etc., etc. So long story short, the sheriff goes to Helen Pierce's house to see if she's there, because all season there's been this private investigator poking around saying that he just wants Helen Pierce to sign some divorce papers. He's paid for by the husband of Helen Pierce, or ex-husband, soon to be, and he's just looking for a signature so he could go back to Chicago. And he's annoyingly poking around all the right places looking for Helen, who was shot in the head previously in Mexico, but nobody knows where she's at. And Javi's smoking and just hanging out in her house, and the sheriff knocks on the door and asks who he is, where's Helen, and he said that he's just house sitting. And then he's like, oh, hold on a second, let me go lower the music so I can get you her contact information to where she's at. And Sheriff Nix, played by Robert C. Trevaler, steps into the house, waits for Javi to lower the music. Javi comes back and just shoots him dead. And Javi just represents chaos in this way, just like the disruptor of every plot point that we've grown accustomed to appreciating. From Marty's exclusive relationship with FBI agent Miller, and him trying to get in between that and sort of kind of figure out what's going on there and kind of disrupt that, to killing Sheriff Nix, not trusting Marty and Wendy at all, wanting to take over the organization of his uncle. And fast forward to the end of the season, where Darlene and Wyatt come home and Javi's in their house waiting for them. And without asking too many questions, without too much back and forth, shoots them both dead in the head, which this show has definitely been doing a lot of lately in terms of killing off main characters and just kind of putting that exclamation point on the drug dealing trope of there only being one way to get out of the two main ways to get out of this, which is either dead in a body bag or locked up in prison. This is definitely going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the final 7 episodes, which again is going to drop April 29th, 2022. And you know whose role I'm interested in a lot? That private investigator guy who seems to be digging around, and from what they kind of revealed, he was a cop but had a coke problem and used to break into the evidence room of his precinct and fucking snort drugs. But he seems to be a bit too good at his job to even have been just an overzealous cop. Supposedly he was a really good cop before getting kicked off the force and becoming a private investigator, quote unquote. So yeah, I think he's definitely going to play a bigger role. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. And some more layers are going to get peeled off of that onion. I feel like he's working for somebody in a larger capacity, and I'm interested to see where that arc goes. But anyway, folks, that was my little recap and review and sharing of resonant moments for me from Ozark Season 4 Part 1, currently streaming on Netflix. Check it out.